Built Better, the podcast for home improvement contractors by Modernize Home Services.
Welcome to Built Better, a podcast by Modernize Home Services. Today, we are meeting with Mark Dawson, the Chief Operating Officer of 1 Hour Heating and Air, to discuss the steps that leadership took to build successful relationships with their franchisees through the establishment of trust and effective communication on a larger scale. So without further ado, let's dive in. You know, with over 370 locations nationwide, going back to kind of the COVID era, right, where we're just about to get out, how have you been able to really communicate effectively with that type of scale? And how did things really change for you during the initial wave? And can you talk to me a little bit how you're kind of planning things out as we start to come out of this stuff?
Yeah, so one of the things with our franchisees is we really ourselves on communication, regular communication, and so we've done that in the past over and over and over again. And so what we really did once COVID hit is we kind of stepped our game up to the next level when it came to communication. So we have regular town hall meetings with our franchisees, talk about strategies and operational issues. We had specific meetings around COVID regulations and things you need to be doing to operate your business in a safe manner for your employees and for your customers. And then we had meetings around the PPP loan process with our franchisees. And that seemed like on a weekly basis there, just to making sure they were all positioned well to get through the process. Because at that point, we didn't know how long it was going to last. But we did know that we were an essential business and that we needed to make sure that we continue to operate and keep the customers hot or cold, depending on where you're at in the country through this process. So just a lot of communication, a lot of phone calls and things like that.
Mark, I'm curious. You know, a lot of the listeners today, they can't see your rich background. So for those listening, I mean, Mark, you've been in this industry or the home improvement industry to some extent for the better part of 25, 30 years. That's how?
30 years. Yeah.
So, and I'm staring at your LinkedIn profile, but what I find interesting, and I'd love to get your perspective on how you think of communication, because although your background is so rich in the residential, you also dabble in the wellness industry a little bit and with the spas and so forth. And so, I don't know, it seems like there's a connection between wellness and communication. And I have to imagine with an organization of your size, it's really important to get the message right. And I also have to imagine it's somewhat challenging when there's so many people at the table across so many time zones. You have so many different locations. How do you think of communication on a larger scale within the organization?
Yeah, so like being in the franchising world for right at 30 years, started off as a franchisee for the first about 12, 13 years of that. And so you learn a lot of things in that process of, one, working with other franchisees and networking with them, and then working with the franchisor. And so I learned those things as a franchisee. And so when I made the move over to the franchisor side, if you will, the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I never lost sight of was how to treat franchisees, how to communicate franchisees, and the things that they go through each and every day in operating their business. And so I tell our franchisees today is like, look, I've been in your shoes. I understand what it's like to run a business. I understand what it's like to be on Friday and trying to make payroll from time to time and just manage all the balls that are in the air. And so when we make decisions at the franchisor level, we take in consideration the franchisees' operations and how it's going to impact them. And then we reach out to franchisees and talk to them about what we're looking at doing and get their buy-in. And so collectively, we're working together to move the brand forward in a positive way. And so we do that in a series of ways. One, I have a FLT, which is a franchise leadership team, which is made up of 10 franchisees that are voted on by the franchise system that work with me from a strategy standpoint. We meet every month and for an hour or two, talk about high-level strategic initiatives. And then, of course, we have some sidebar conversations as well. But that's important because it helps me get the pulse of the franchise system. we have what we call a green team meeting, which is our top 10 franchisees in each one of our brands. And those, we meet with those once a month, and they share best practices. Really, we're there just to facilitate the meeting and keep it on point, but they're sharing best practices. And then we're able to learn more things about that to take that back to our other franchisees that are continuing to grow their business. We have franchise business consultants, which reach out to our franchisees on a monthly basis. Of course, the franchisee can talk to the franchise business consultant at any time, but we're talking about high-level things. We're talking about how they're operating through the COVID. We're talking about recruiting opportunities, how to grow their team, how to train their team. We get into the numbers of the business because it's very important for us to, one, grow their top line, and two, make sure they have a very healthy bottom line. So lots of communication, lots of back and forth. And you know, those conversations can be intense at times, right? Because sometimes they're going to hear some things from us they may not want to hear, and vice versa. Sometimes they're going to tell us that we may not be as pretty as we think we are, and we need to step our game up. And I think that makes for a healthy relationship, and I think it allows you to move forward. If everybody's just kind of skipping hand in hand saying, hey, everything's great, well, usually that means everything's not great because you're not talking. So having that open communication allows us to really look at us ourselves and in a way to make the right decisions long term for our franchise systems.
No, that's great. Let me ask you this on a follow-up on that, just because I think communication is, I mean, Dom will know, I preach it all the time in the organization. I think it's the single greatest skill we can all possess, right? When you think of how do you get all these franchisees, how do you get them to open up? How do you get them to, I guess, feel like it's a circle of trust, right? Like, we're not going to be honest with people. We're not going to go there. We're not going to want to listen to other people until we feel like we're being listened to. And I love the fact that you said kind of within these groups, there's some best practice sharing. That kind of made me take it as like they're involved, right? We all know if there's some involvement, there's some commitment. But I have to imagine two challenges I'd love you to speak to. One, getting these people to slow down enough where they can start to look at some of this. And then once they slow down, how do you get them to open up and be honest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from a trust, I mean, you know, there's an old saying that says it takes a long time to build trust, but it's easily given away, right? So one bad decision, everything that you've worked so hard to gain and to build can be torn apart by just one communication. So we talk about trust and a lot, and in the town hall meetings. And when I first started this position with 1 Hour back in 2019, that was the first meeting we had, and we talked about trust, we talked about honesty, we talked about integrity, and then we talked about respect and how we were going to treat each other and how we were going to build the relationship. And so my goal is to let my actions speak for themselves from a trust standpoint. And I feel like that if I do the right things, that trust will continue to grow. And as we build that relationship, we'll move a little faster as a company. So we do a very good job of that. And we've found a way to make sure that the franchisees feel secure in communicating with us, right? So in our town hall meetings, they can ask any questions. That's a global question. If they have any individual questions about their specific business, they can reach out to me, our Lance, our vice president, or anybody on the team. The one thing that they know for sure, that is if they call me, I will answer the phone. So if I'm not in the middle of a meeting and my phone rings, I'm going to pick the phone up. I don't let it go to voicemail. And I expect everybody on my team to do the same thing. And so early on in the relationship, it was kind of funny. Some people called and I answered. They're like, wow, you do answer, because my predecessor did not take that time with them. And so it's about building relationships. It's about being a man of your word and doing the things that you're going to say. And so in 1992, when I first became a franchisee, I bought a company, and that was in debt, right? That's how I bought the company. And so I took over the debt. And the only way to pay that debt off was to go to each one of those vendors and give them my word of what I was going to do and how I was going to execute my plan and pay that debt off over a period of time, which we did in about 1.5 years. And so I go back to that. And that was a lesson that I learned early on, is to be a man of your word, do what you say you're going to do, and everything else will take care of itself. It's when when you try to get shifty, it's going to cause problems. And look, my dad is 85 years old, and he taught me a long time ago, you know what, you've got my last name. You make sure you do the right things every time. And so the corporations that I actually put together that I own myself as a franchisee were called DTRT, which stands for Do the Right Thing. And so I believe that's the motto I've lived by to this point, and it's done me well.